For the next 15 minutes, I'm going to be a huge Rachel Zegler apologist, which I just have to admit, I think even being an apologist is pretty stupid because she really doesn't have anything to apologize for. And that's what I want to talk about today in my kind of sort of review of Snow White. This is the live action remake of the classic Snow White. You don't need me to tell you the story because it's fucking Snow White. But what I do want to talk about is Rachel Zegler and what is going on in the media zeitgeist, what is going on in the culture that is allowing such negative publicity to surround such a young, talented star. And I want to talk about what the mainstream media won't talk about, and specifically how it is failing an actress like Rachel Zegler. And I find it so alarming what is going on and the pile on that is happening. Listen, I should say this. First and foremost, I am a film critic. And if you want my thoughts on this movie specifically, you can check out all of my other live action Disney reviews, because the same issues that I have in those movies are basically the same issues that I have in Snow White. Copy and paste it. Here's what I will say though. The reason I need to discuss this in my review of Snow White is because when the stink around it becomes so bad, it definitely affects people's feelings towards this movie and their ability to be able to enjoy it / to be able to disconnect with this movie. So that's what I want to talk about. The way that people won't judge this movie based on the merits / lack of merits in this film, but based on how they feel / based on how they are being told to feel. And let's just get into this right now, because the same crowd that consistently yells, separate the art from the artist, is now freaking out about the artist. It's such hypocrisy. And that's what we need to get into today, because I think there's a few things happening. I think Disney uses their actors of color for good press to showcase a growing diversity at Disney, whether they present them at D23, Comic-Con, or whatever. They get to run to the press. They get to run to Hollywood Reporter. They get to run to Variety, Deadline, all these outlines, and be like, well, look at what we champion. Look at all this. And then when it comes time to actually protect the star, when conservative backlash happens, when everything about diversity is being attacked from one side, Disney cowers and fails time and time again to protect their stars. And let's have it right here. This is right-wing media run amok, and that's what we need to talk about. That is the focus of this. And this is not a review that in any means is going to bash anyone who is voting right-wing, who has conservative politics. That's not the point of this. Rather, it is to look at an echo chamber that exists in right-wing media that is perpetrating, and how it is so annoying, the disingenuousness of these conversations, and how the more traditional, or if you want to call it left-wing, or whatever you want to call it, media, the mainstream media, I guess as it's labeled, how they're buying into it and they're adding more dividends because outrage pays the fucking bills now. And that's what we want to talk about today, because there are these so-called progressive values that Disney has that anytime they are challenged on it, they cave. It is not a progressive value if the exact second any pressure or any scrutiny comes, you cave like a house of cards. That's not a value. That's a paycheck. That's an easy thing you do to win points from people. You don't have a value. You don't have a backbone at that point. Let's kind of talk about everything that is happening. This is the conservative media's game plan. But what pisses me off specifically about this is the mainstream media is going along with this, and they are not pushing back and they are not fighting. Instead, here is what they are doing. I want to read you a few headlines that I find damning, and I think the issue with the way media is being reported now. From the New York Times, inside the controversy surrounding Disney's Snow White remake. Wall Street Journal, Disney's new Snow White movie is making pretty much everyone mad. Time Magazine, why Disney's Snow White remake is creating controversy. Hollywood Reporter, Daily Wire making a rival Snow White movie trolling Disney. Deadline. The Daily Wire is making a live-action Snow White movie starring conservative YouTuber Brett Cooper, comma, watch teaser. That's a Deadline headline. You know what drives me in freaking sane about this? Why are you giving someone, and specifically with the Hollywood Reporter and the Deadline articles here, why are you giving Daily Wire the credibility to essentially be at the table, to have equal footing, for their attacks to mean anything? Here's just a few things. Like, yes, Daily Wire is making this. Yes, this is a company that is known for Ben Shapiro, and I believe it's a company that Ben Shapiro helped create. Here's the thing. Here's just a few things. In 2010, Ben Shapiro said homosexuality should not be removed as a mental illness from the DSM. He opposes gay people from raising children. That's another thing. Here's another thing he said. One American soldier's life is worth more than the Afghan citizens killed by Americans. Here's other comments that he's had in the past. Dismisses the idea that America was founded on slavery. Advocates that the cop that shot and killed George Floyd should be pardoned. He is anti-LGBT. He is anti-abortion. He is a racist. He is someone who hates Hollywood for what it stands for. He makes so many YouTube videos grifting on Hollywood and having this outrage towards it. You don't need to then write an article about him having this Snow White movie to go against the controversy of this one and the non-woke version of it. You just don't have to pay attention. Ben Shapiro can make whatever fuck he wants to make, but you don't actually need to then pay attention and give him the dividends. You don't have to give him the publicity that he so craves. That is the issue right now. And that's what I'm thinking about when I'm watching Snow White, or when I'm seeing the backlash surrounding Snow White. 90% of what comes out of Ben Shapiro's mouth is far more offensive than anything Rachel Zegler has said. It is far more disgusting. It is far more just horrendous, disgusting behavior and beliefs that Ben Shapiro spews. Beliefs that I don't even think he actually holds. I think he just says them because he knows it's going to get a reaction. That is what it is. That is what the art of grifting is. And he is a masterful artist in that. He knows how to create faux outrage. And then what we end up doing, the ones who don't actually feel in line with him or don't agree with him, we end up getting in a mud fight with him. We should be doing is what you do with any person like this, what you do with any bully. You ignore them. You ignore these stupid attempts at outrage. But rather what is happening is we are putting it at an equal footing. We then end up debating these talking points. And then we're stuck in a losing battle, because guess what? No matter what logic we bring in, no matter what evidence we have, no matter anything, it doesn't matter, because the outrage is disingenuous. What they are saying is in bad faith, and all they want to do is sensationalize. Again, that's the tactic. They don't actually need to even believe everything they think, but they know if they can cause enough outrage, it gives them the attention. And in the case of a film like Snow White, it completely destroys the movie's reputation before it comes out. They've been basically allowed to attack this movie for nothing. They've faced no real consequence. They have gone on it, and no one has given them backlash. And all we've done is give them publicity. They are playing distraction, and we are playing right into their hand. And we fall for it time and time again. And I get acknowledging it in this video is essentially playing into their hand. I'm not dumb. I get that. However, I want to make people aware of this, because I think in scenarios like this, it's so easy for even people like me who are just see the negative headlines, don't necessarily know what's all feeling it. And then we make a review and we're just the new Snow White movie, it's pretty bad. This movie's really dumb. It didn't need to be made. Gal Gadot's a bad actress, Rachel Zegler. It's so easy for us to buy into a mainstream narrative that is growing online, that has this online fervor, that we don't even necessarily realize where it's stemming from. And that's, I think, what I really want to get clear. I have issues with this new Snow White movie. God, I have a lot of them, actually. But in talking about them, I'm trying to separate them and weave them out of the ongoing narratives and be able to talk about them, but also understand why some of the negative press around this movie is completely unwarranted and unwanted, especially to Rachel Zegler. That's what I really want to stress. You can go after a corporation. If Disney and Daily Wire want to get into this feuding piss and match online, like, Disney has all the money in the world to get into that. I don't really care. That's Disney's prerogative. Rachel Zegler, she has a lot of money. Like, I get it. She's this young and upcoming actress. To be in that situation where she is in the middle of this, I think is so unfair for her. I think it is just something that I'm seeing so many people who don't even necessarily believe in this / know where the sources of so much of these complaints are coming from, and they attack her. It's a distraction and we fall for it. And now Rachel Zegler has become this thrown into the conservative machine that mainstream traditional / liberal media, whatever you want to call it, we're just fanning the flames. That's the other thing that really pisses me off. They can say whatever they want, and you can believe whatever you want. But then I think it is the job of authentic, good journalists who are presenting in good faith and reporting on good faith not to get sucked into the rabbit hole of clickbait / fake / faux outrage that they are trying to get you into. So writing articles explaining the controversy, writing like all this stuff that really is fueling the negative publicity around this movie, not like reviews. I want to get that clear. If you're writing a honest to God review of this movie, that's not an issue. But if you're writing about like, oh, Rachel Zegler and Gal Gadot hate one another, or you're writing, oh, Rachel Zegler being distanced from Snow White due to her beliefs on Palestine and Disney is annoyed at her, like all this stuff. Like if you're doing that, you're just feeding into the hand that they want you to feed into. That's where we need to be better at this, because we are buying into the narrative that they set up for us. I think it's extremely annoying. And yes, does Rachel Zegler make herself in some ways an easy target for this? Yes, in some ways that are completely fair, and in some ways that are also completely not fair. She gets a lot of this because she is young, because she is brash online, because she makes her political opinions known on controversial subjects. She is very pro-Palestine, and that obviously rubs a lot of people, not even necessarily on the conservative side, but enough of the liberal side too. In fact, probably a good chunk of the liberal side disagrees with her views on this. So does she open herself out by being open on social media? She completely does. Now, does she also get attacked more because she is a person of color? Because she is a young woman on the internet? That is also true. Like I said, there is so many complexities to this, but I think we have seen time and time again, Disney failed to protect its young stars. They use them, they make a / champion out of them, and they champion them for what they stand for and what Disney stands for. And then when the time comes, as it comes multiple times, look at The Little Mermaid in 2023. Look at what that lead star went under for all of that. Like, that is all in this, and they consistently show a willingness to just throw their actors under the bus when the time comes. And I say this because the damage is done for Snow White. This movie's not tracking well. It doesn't seem to be having a good box office performance. I'm recording this Saturday, March 22nd, and it's looking like it might not even make 40 million domestically opening weekend. I also think this movie isn't getting a fair chance due to the bad publicity around this movie. And I also want to say, in many parts, this is just due to Disney's decision to make this type of film. Here's the thing, I am not one to defend the decision for Disney to remake their classic properties. I've called it creatively bankrupt. So much of this is seeds sown. Like, much of this is their own fault. Like, yes, is all of the bad publicity really hurting their bottom line? I do believe so. I do believe even people who maybe aren't necessarily opposed to watching this movie, they've heard enough of these headlines and they're like, I don't really need to go see this movie, or it just sounds so bad and it just sounds like something I'm not into. Like, that is definitely happening as well. And like I said, I don't blame people for having that reaction. Like, I do think Snow White represents everything that is wrong with Hollywood. And I will say that this movie isn't like that bad. Like, this, even in the Disney canon of live action films, this is probably somewhere in the middle, maybe even above that. Like, this isn't a bad film to watch. I did not hate this movie. There is things that this movie even does that I would call okay to good, but it is just the same lesson we keep learning. This was clearly made to cash in on the Snow White IP and to sell merch. This is basically the same version of the 1937 animated classic, but just done worse. This movie is visually bland, and occasionally that visual effects is just downright disastrous. And it is an unnecessary waste of its star talent. In this case, it's Rachel Zegler's star talent. Now, there are other things that I will say that Snow White does well as a movie. I think, one, it has a good design of costumes, specifically, and I really should stress this, of Snow White and the Evil Witch. I think like Gal Gadot and Rachel Zegler are both well costumed in this movie. Other characters in this movie, like the prince, like there's a lot of other ones where I'm like, the costume seems kind of lazy. Like at one point it looked like a character was just wearing like a hoodie type. But there's other good things. Like there's some really good practical sets in this movie. Like I saw a few where I'm like, oh, okay, like this doesn't just look like a CGI town like others have. There is decent to good choreography. Mark Webb gets some good choreography in this. There's like some actual good like musical set pieces that feel something akin to a classical Broadway musical. I liked elements like that in attempts. They don't all work, but there are moments where I'm like, oh, okay, this one feels a little bit more expansive in what it's trying to be. There's a few additions to the story that add some thematic weight to it, and I thought the thematic weight of rebellion like worked really well, and like a princess coming home to reclaim and save her citizens, like that stuff worked well. And I think that's also due to just how good Rachel Zegler is in this movie. I thought she was really good as Snow White in this movie. I don't have anything bad to say about her performance. There are other elements of it that are just like downright disastrous. Do you remember what the 1937 film is entitled? Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs? Well, the 2025 film decided to just call it Disney's Snow White because they didn't want to get into the dwarf stuff. They didn't want to get into the political correctness of it. And this is where I find it so silly. It's where we've gone too far in one direction not to be offensive, that we've actually gone back to a place that I kind of find offensive, which I'll talk about in a second. But they took less focus on the dwarves in this one, and instead they put the focus on the story of a kingdom that has been stolen from its people and the princess who must come and save the day. This is a very familiar archetype within fantasy, and I just want to say, like, it's an archetype for a reason. It works pretty well, and in this movie it's actually not done that poorly. I think it works well enough in this movie, and seeing a princess so kind to her people and the people who stand with her at the end, like, there is something moving about that like this movie is able to capture due to the Zegler performance, but also the way that Webb is able to weave this story. To be honest, this is a movie that should be kind of thankful it didn't focus on the Seven Dwarfs, even though they are in this movie, because focusing more on them actually would have been a disaster. Not focusing on them is a blessing in disguise. I rewatched the animated film today. I don't think I had seen it since I was a child, like 3 or 4. And I obviously knew the story of Snow White, like to a broad scope. The dwarves are like basically 80% of the humor / the movie. Like the story doesn't happen without the dwarves in this movie. Like you have the beginning, which sends Snow White to the forest, and then you have the end where she comes back. But like, really, that's like probably like 10 to 15 minutes of the entire film. The rest is just like shenanigans with the dwarves and the dwarves being cute. Like Dopey's really cute, like running back for the kiss and stuff like that in that movie. Like a lot of it, like of the heart of that movie is the seven dwarfs, their story, their fun with Snow White. And like in this movie, they really exnay that. Like the dwarves are a part of this movie. You do go through all the classic beats. Like there's not a ton of humor with these characters. It's kind of brief. Like it's really just like hitting the main parts that the animated movie hits, and then just kind of going from there. Like it doesn't really stop to spend a ton of time with these characters. Like in the animated film, you get to know all these characters pretty well, obviously due to their names, and you can immediately like get a characteristic of them. In this movie, it's like you remember Grumpy, you remember Dopey, you remember Doc, and then there's like four other dwarves who don't have really a lot to do in this movie and like are just kind of there for like the ensemble. The worst part of this movie, though, and the reason it's a disaster, is because the CGI. They just CGI the dwarfs, and it looks downright scary. Like it looks so bad. Dopey looks like the Mad Magazine kid. Like, and I'm not kidding. Like it's horrendous how this movie looks. And essentially they did this because the actor Peter Dinklage did this interview where he was talking about the stereotypes of dwarfs on screen, like how they always get cast in certain roles, how they don't get respected within Hollywood. It wasn't necessarily as direct of an attack as people took it to be on Snow White. Like there is certainly an element of it that I think is unfair criticism necessarily, but there's also a lot of it that I in some ways agree with Peter Dinklage. But I think the outline of it became the news story of it. And what ultimately ended up happening was Disney kind of issued an apology, said like, hey, that's not like what we're doing here. Like we're trying to do something else. And so what they do is they animate the dwarfs and they cast like famous actors in them, or famous enough actors. Like you have the kid who plays Dear Evan Hansen on the Broadway play. You have Titus from Kimmy Schmidt in this. Like I looked at it. There is only one actor who has dwarfism in this movie, Martin Kleba. Some of you might know him as Marty from the Pirates of the Caribbean film. You wouldn't recognize him in this movie because he's CGI'd over. Like, you know what would have been like really cool? Like, had you given 7 actors with dwarfism the ability to play this role and like play these really iconic characters and like make a name for themselves. And because I totally agree, you want to give actors like Peter Dinklage or actors like Martin, like you want to give them the chance to just be in roles that don't necessarily matter about their height. Like that's totally something. Dinklage has been able to do that in his career throughout. Like his height isn't necessarily a staple of all his characters. Now in some it's very important, but for others he just gets to play an everyday regular guy. And that's what inclusion looks like. It really would have been helpful for like 7 actors with dwarfism, like to get this opportunity and to star in this movie and to get to make like a name for themselves. And then that way they get those opportunities. And again, I'm not advocating like these should be the only 7 roles for actors with dwarfism to like have. Like that's obviously not what I'm advocating for. But I am advocating when the role makes sense and you can get 7 actors and you can actually like pick out 7 actors to get a role of a really famous character with a very famous studio and to get them that publicity and then to allow them to get more exposure from that due to the publicity that they're getting from starring in like a $200 million Disney film that a lot of kids, a lot of families are going to watch. That's where you get to have a more expansive career. But ultimately they decided against that. Like, you know, even like allowing them to be the voice of the character would have been a good act. Instead, it's just like, 1 for 7. That's good enough. Like, again, another thing where I just don't understand what they were doing here. But yeah, like, besides that, Rachel Zegler's good in this movie. I do think she's genuinely good in this movie. She's a great singer. She's like so incredibly gifted as a singer. I liked her in this role. I like that the softness and kindness that she brings to it. I thought it worked. I will say it does feel a little bit more like a modern Disney princess. Like I rewatched the 1930s Snow White, and there is something supposed to be very delicate about this character. There's something supposed to be a little like classical to this character and feel like she's supposed to be very soft. Rachel Zegler doesn't necessarily do that. She does kind very well, like, and she has a softness quality to her, but she never like feels delicate. And that's maybe a needed change, but I will admit, like, there is something that takes rewatching the animated Snow White is what I should say. There is something that kind of feels timeless about that way that Snow White is portrayed, and it's supposed to be a very motherly character. It is supposed to be such a loving, kind character that you're supposed to feel safe around. And Rachel Zegler is playing it a little bit more modern in it. Like, she is playing it closer to that Katniss Everdeen, like the reason for resistance, the reason for someone to rally around her, a good person who the people around her rally around. And like, in many ways that's a needed change, and then also in many ways it's like not the Snow White you may feel / remember. Again, I liked how they modernized this character, and I think it worked nonetheless. And she's so talented, and she's really the saving grace of this movie. But besides that, like, yeah, everything else kind of stands with this movie. You kind of know what this movie is, and I think that's kind of the issue with this movie. And I think that is also a big reason why this movie is susceptible to the attacks that it's getting. Because you don't have a lot of people who are like really like rolling up their sleeves, going to be like, we're going to go to bat for Disney's Snow White remake. Like, maybe if this was an original film, like anything like that, maybe that's where you have some people going like, hey, the treatment that she's getting is so unfair, or like, you know, they're like out there defending, or they're like really trying to push back. In this case, they're not. And I find it, like I said, I read all those headlines and articles while thinking about how I wanted to talk about this movie. And I'm like, well, this is what's wrong. This is how we get here. And this is just like the unfortunate existence of online film criticism / film journalism / journalism as a whole. We are an outrage culture, and it's not leaving anytime soon. So I think it's my responsibility, and everyone else who does this in a what I believe to be a genuine way, to talk about it, to combat it, and to try and be as honest and truthful as a positive. And that's all you can ask for on this. I think the only thing that I can deliver to you guys is honest and truthfulness. And I hope I did that today in talking about Snow White and my feelings surrounding this shit show of a production that we can now close the chapter on. So thank you so much for watching my review / my thoughts / everything else. And I hope you guys consider subscribing. I'll be back for a more traditional review in the film Ash, starring Aaron Paul, which I will be having a review for in theory on Tuesday. So thank you so much for subscribing, and I hope you guys tune in Tuesday.